We tend to think of babies as these simple little beings, right? Eat, sleep, cry, repeat. But what if there's this incredibly rich, complex, emotional world firing away inside that tiny head? Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today. We're going to pull back the curtain and see how even the smallest, everyday moments are literally wiring their brains for life. And I want to start with a question that, well, it might just surprise you.
Okay, so picture this. Your baby is sound asleep in their crib, and you're having a heated conversation, maybe an argument, in the next room. What if your baby could hear that? Not just hear it, but their brain actually reacts to the angry tones, all while they're fast asleep. I mean, that thought alone kind of challenges everything we assume about what they're aware of, doesn't it? Well, get this. It's not a what if, it's a fact. There was this incredible fMRI study, and researchers found exactly that. They had these little infants asleep inside a scanner, and they played them nonsense sentences, but spoken in different emotional tones: happy, neutral, and angry. And the results? They were just stunning. Babies from homes with a lot of conflict showed way more brain activity in the areas tied to stress and emotion when they heard that angry voice. The takeaway here is huge. Babies are not tuned out. Their brains are listening, they're learning, and they're soaking up the emotional vibe around them, even when they're asleep.
So, you're probably asking, how is that even possible? Well, it all boils down to the amazing science of how a baby's brain develops. You see, these first couple of years, they're this supercritical window where the actual architecture of their brain is being built, piece by piece, moment by moment. Okay, so the big idea you need to get is something called brain plasticity. And I love this analogy for it. Think of a baby's brain like a fresh patch of wet cement. From the last part of pregnancy up to about age 2, that brain is growing faster than it ever will again. So every single experience, every touch, every word you speak, every little interaction, it's like it's leaving an impression in that cement. And you know how it is with cement, right? The first marks you make are the ones that set the hardest. It really hammers home why the kind of care they get in those early years is so important.
And that leads us right into this amazing concept called co-regulation. Here's the deal. A baby's nervous system can't handle big feelings on its own. It's just not built for it yet. So they are completely 100% dependent on us. A caregiver's calm presence. It literally works like an external thermostat for their emotions. So when a baby is upset, our soothing voice or a gentle touch actually helps their little body come back to a calm, balanced state. We are, quite literally, their regulators.
But what happens when that calming presence isn't there? That's when you run into something called toxic stress. And look, this is not the normal, healthy kind of stress, like when you're learning something new. No, toxic stress is when a baby is going through these intense, long periods of distress, and there's no supportive adult there to buffer them. What happens then is their brain gets flooded with the stress hormone cortisol. And too much of that stuff can actually be damaging to their developing brain.
And this table here, it just lays it out so clearly. You can see the two totally different paths a brain can go down. On one side, with sensitive care, you get a balanced stress response. The brain builds these really strong pathways for things like empathy and social skills. The kid feels safe. They feel confident to go out and explore the world. But then you look at the other side. Under chronic stress, that whole system gets thrown out of whack. Cortisol levels are always high. The brain's fear center, the amygdala, goes into overdrive. And what you're building is a foundation of insecurity. I mean, we're talking about two completely different futures, and it all comes down to these early interactions.
So, and this is really important, we're not just talking about big, obvious traumatic events here. The science is starting to show us how really common, everyday things we do, often without even thinking about it, can actually feel like a major stressor from a baby's point of view.
Let's talk about a super modern one, the digital still face. Yeah, researchers have this term for it, technoference. It's basically how our phones can just completely yank our attention away from our kids in a split second. What feels to us like just a quick text or a scroll can be a totally different and much more jarring experience for a baby.
And this quote right here connects it to a famous psychology experiment called the still face paradigm. Basically, what they did was have a parent play with their baby, totally engaged, and then boom, the parent's face just goes completely blank, unresponsive. And what happens is heartbreaking. The baby gets confused, then distressed. They try everything to get a reaction back, and when they don't, they just fall apart. While a parent staring down at a phone, it creates the exact same effect. It's this sudden, confusing break in the connection. It's a perfect example of that co-regulation process getting cut off, and it creates these little micro moments of stress for the baby.
Okay, let's look at another one. This is a big one. Planned ignoring. It's often taught as a parenting trick, right? The idea is if you just ignore a behavior you don't like crying, it'll go away.
But have we ever stopped to think about it from the baby's perspective? What are they actually learning in that moment?
Well, from their perspective, the message can be pretty devastating. Dr. Mona de la Houck puts it perfectly. It's like the adult is saying, I'm not interested in what you're trying to tell me. I'll only pay attention when you do what I want. This totally reframes everything. Their crying isn't manipulation, it's communication. It's the only way they know how to talk. And when we ignore that, we're basically telling them to stop trying to connect with us.
And then there's the tricky one, teasing. What might feel like just some harmless fun to us, like, pretending to take away a toy or laughing when they get a little frustrated, can be super confusing for a baby. They don't get irony. They don't get the joke. All they feel is this mixed message. Wait, the person who's supposed to make me feel safe is now making me feel confused and maybe even a little scared? That kind of stuff undermines trust. Real, playful connection, on the other hand, that's what builds security.
Okay, so after hearing all that, you might be thinking, so what do I do? How can we get better at decoding what our babies need? Well, here's the good news. They are talking to us all the time. We just have to learn how to speak their language.
So this is a great little cheat sheet here from UNICEF. These are some of the most common ways little kids under 3 show us they're stressed. And notice, it's not always some big dramatic meltdown. It can be really subtle things, like changes in their eating or sleeping habits, or maybe they're just extra clingy all of a sudden, or they start acting younger than they are. All of these are just little flags they're waving to say, hey, something feels off in my world right now.
And we can break it down even more. So you have that quiet alert state, that's when their eyes are bright, they're looking around. That's prime time for connection and learning. But then you got to watch for signs of overstimulation. They start looking away, they arch their back, they might yawn a lot. That's their way of saying, okay, I need a break. If we miss those signs, that can tip over into real distress, crying, screaming. And if that goes on for too long without comfort, some babies just shut down. They get listless, just kind of staring. Our whole job is to catch those early signals and respond instead of just reacting to the big meltdown later.
I know. This can all sound like a lot of pressure. But the solution, it's actually really, really simple. It is not about being a perfect parent. Nobody is. It's about being a present parent. The single most powerful tool we have to build a strong, resilient brain in our kids is just connection.
And check this out. Here's a super simple, practical tool for that co-regulation we were talking about. Anyone can do this. It's called belly breathing. You can do it with your child. You just put a hand on your stomach, take some deep breaths, and have them feel your tummy go up and down like a balloon. When you do that, you're not just calming them down, you're calming your own nervous system down too. That right there, that's co-regulation in action.
So, in the end, all of this research, all of this science, it boils down to one really powerful and honestly really hopeful idea. The absolute best thing for them, the most effective way to protect them from stress and help them thrive is just high-quality, stable, predictable caregiving. A loving relationship. It's not about the expensive toys at the fancy classes. It's the quality of your connection with them. That is what wires their brain for a healthy life.
So if we think about it that way, that a baby's primary language isn't English or Spanish or anything else, but the feeling of being connected, it kind of leaves us with one last big question. Through our presence, through our attention, through how we respond to them, what message are we sending? What are you going to say to your baby today?